Although the first digital photo was created in 1957, the first portable digital camera was not on the market until 1989. In this video we will take a look at the evolution and decline of digital cameras from the start until today. The first digital photo was created in 1957 using a drum scanner similar to this modern version. It used a photo multiplier tube to capture each pixel. "14 years later, the first digital camera appeared at an observatory in Chile. Developed by McCord and Westphal, from MIT and Caltech. It weighed 10 pounds and featured a 256 by 256 resolution. Although it produced noisy images, it was a huge leap, as it led to consistent and measurable evaluation of gas distribution. The image sensor was a Vidicon tube, developed by RCA in the 50s, and popular in video cameras throughout the 70s and 80s. That same year, Bell Labs had submitted a patent application for a much smaller image sensor, the CCD, that would later be used in most digital cameras. 2 years later, the first commercial CCD camera was developed by Fairchild. The MV-100, quickly followed by the MV-101. Both implemented a 100 by 100 CCD sensor. The impressive feature of these cameras was mainly their small size. The Cromemco Cyclops was introduced as a hobbyist construction project in the February 1975 issue of Popular Electronics. It was the first commercial all-digital camera, and the first to be interfaced to a microcomputer, as it required an Altair 8800 or equivalent to function. The digital sensor for the camera was a modified 1K memory chip that offered a resolution of 32 by 32 pixels or 0.001 megapixels. Also in 1975, Steve Sasson at Kodak developed the world's first CCD digital camera that was self-contained. Although it weighed 8 pounds, you could fit the entire camera in your hands. It used cassettes for permanent storage of the digital photos. Steve estimated it would take 15 to 20 years to get it to market, since all the components of the time were too large. Although Sony made the first camera that saved photos to disk, it was not a digital camera. It saved 50 analog video stills to disk, without digital conversion. Sony never marketed the analog Mavicas because they were not satisfied with the resolution nor picture quality. In 1983, MegaVision introduced the first external image processor, as only supercomputers and mainframes of that time could handle large images. In 1986, MegaVision used that image processor in the first digital photography system for photo studios. This was the camera used in that system. In 1987, Videk, a Kodak venture, began selling the Megaplus, the world's first megapixel camera. It used a 1.4 million pixel CCD, developed a year earlier by Kodak. It was the first sensor with enough resolution to produce a decent 5x7 photo print. Although tons of camera patents were filed throughout the 80s, it wasn't until 1988 that we saw the world's first modern digital camera, the Fuji DS-1P. It was also the first to record digital images on removable flash card media. The card was developed jointly with Toshiba and required a card player connected to a TV. Ultimately, it was never sold to consumers and was only used internally. The following year, Fuji and Toshiba worked together to produce the first commercial digital cameras, the Fuji DS-X and Toshiba IMC-100. These were released in the Japanese market along with their companion memory card players, viewers and printers. The first digital camera sold in the US was the Dycam Model 1, which also sold as the Logitech Photoman. Few Model 1s were produced and sold through limited channels, but the Logitech version were mass-produced and were a huge success. The camera was quite simple in order to reduce costs. Meanwhile in Japan, Fujifilm and Toshiba were releasing prosumer digital cameras and new memory card peripherals. The Kodak Professional Digital Camera System was the first ever digital SLR. It was meant for journalists but was more popular in the scientific community. It consisted of a camera back and winder, fitted to an unmodified Nikon F3 and a separate digital storage unit. Nikon had no knowledge of this project and did not assist until the third generation of the DCS. The Apple QuickTake was the first color digital camera priced under $1,000. It was built by Kodak in collaboration with Apple. It had the same style as the Apple PowerBooks of the era. Sadly, when Steve Jobs rejoined the company in 1997, the QuickTake line was cut. The Olympus Deltis featured photo transfers over phone lines, something that wouldn't be seen for many years later without the use of a computer. It could transfer one image in approximately 6 minutes. It also featured an LCD viewfinder, which was not common at that time. It allowed the user to review and select photos for transmission. The Casio QV-10 replaced the viewfinder with an LCD display, which allowed users to compose photos and play them back. Previously, LCDs were mostly used to display text with camera status and settings. The lens also swiveled forward, which was perfect for selfies. The Mavica cameras finally went digital in 1997, with the FD5 and its 10x zoom twin, the FD7. To reduce cost, Sony implemented their 3.5-inch floppy drive technology, which provided 1.4 megabytes on each disk. Enough space for 20 photos. The Mavica cameras were incredibly popular. At one point it accounted for 40% of all digital camera sales in the US. In May of 1999, Kyocera launched the first phone with a built-in camera. It used CMOS sensors, as opposed to CCDs, for their smaller size and lower cost. The phone could store 20 photos and transmit live video at a rate of 2 frames per second. With only a front-facing camera, its focus was on selfies and video calls. It was the start of a revolution. That same year the 2.7 megapixel Nikon D1 launched. It was the first DSLR body designed from scratch by a single manufacturer. Kodak had finally lost its reign over the professional market, due to the D1. Its quality made the digital camera a serious challenger to professional film SLRs. It offered the image quality, build, and performance required by photojournalists. In the year 2000, Sony updated their Mavica line from floppies to 3-inch CDRs. Like floppies, any computer with a CD-ROM drive could read the photos. But unlike a floppy, CDRs could not be erased, so at $4 each, it resulted in every photo costing around 3 cents. This digital camera was also one of the first to feature optical image stabilization, which came from Sony's camcorder line. By integrating the optics and sensor into a single tiny module, Casio leapt forward in ultra-compact designs, with the 0.4-inch thick S1 and its twin, the M1. Casio helped transform the digital camera from a geeky gadget into an everyday tool and fashion accessory. Unfortunately, bad news was on the horizon for digital camera developers. In June 2003, Dakota accidentally released the cheapest digital camera around. They were actually single-use digital cameras with capacity for 25 photos. The cameras were supposed to be returned to participating camera shops for printing and recycling, but were quickly hacked. The hack allowed them to be connected to a computer and reused. At the time, a digital camera of similar resolution and functionality was in the $40 to $70 range, while this was only $11. The EasyShare One was the first camera with Wi-Fi connectivity that allowed photo sharing. It let users email photos, upload to a gallery, and print wirelessly. While the Coolpix P1, which was released a few weeks earlier, only allowed wireless transfer to a specific computer. Unfortunately, the EasyShare flopped. Since very few Wi-Fi hotspots were available back then, and the subpar photo quality and confusing interface did not help either. In 2006, 2 years after the first GoPro was launched, which used Photofilm, the company launched a digital version. It was able to capture both photos and video, but videos were limited to 10 seconds, at 10 frames per second. Also, it only had a 0.3 megapixel sensor, while other waterproof cameras of the time had at least 2 megapixel sensors. When Apple introduced its simple and fun interface for digital photography, it made camera developers very nervous. It made point-and-shoot cameras look cumbersome and limiting, particularly the following year, when many photo apps launched. The FinePix Real 3D was the first consumer 3D digital camera. It boasted a pair of 10 megapixel sensors and a 2.8-inch 3D display. The photos could be viewed in 3D using the camera's binocular parallax display, connecting the camera to a 3D TV, using a 3D digital photo frame, or by ordering stereoscopic photo prints. Fuji stopped printing 3D photos in 2013 when interest in 3D faded. 2010 saw the last peak in digital camera sales. Smartphone photo quality was improving so quickly that the general public was no longer considering purchasing a separate camera. Because of this, digital camera sales have dropped by over 90% since 2010. The Z340 was Polaroid's first try at going digital. It used the zinc technology to print 3x4 photos, the same size as classic Polaroid photos. The benefits were many. You could choose what to print, edit photos, add photo filters, and print multiple copies. Zinc photo printing took 45 seconds and did not require ink cartridges. Instead, heat, up to 392 degrees, melted color crystals within the photo paper. The following year, another amazing technology was released, a light field camera from Lytro. It allowed you to refocus your photos after they had been taken. It was basically like taking many photos simultaneously, focused on different planes. The original camera featured an 11 mega ray sensor, which produced pretty large files, about 16 megabytes each. The camera came in 2 versions, one with 8 gigabytes of memory, which held 350 photos, and one with 16 gigabytes, which held 750. Even though camera sales continued to decline, the innovations continued. Ricoh introduced the first handheld 360 digital camera. It simplified the process of creating a 360-degree photo or video down to a single button press. It did not have a display, but instead relied on a smartphone app that allowed you to control the camera and capture, and another to edit and share your creations. An external iPhone camera was launched in 2015 in order to capture professional quality photos and video. Quality similar to what's offered on current iPhones. It worked with both iPads and iPhones, running iOS 8 or later. The DxO1 could also be used on its own without a display, since it could save images to micro SD, and was powered with its own battery. In 2017, Light shipped a camera that took DSLR quality photos but without the DSLR weight and size. It featured 16 different lenses, each with 13 megapixel sensors, and all worked together to create exposures at different focal lengths and resolutions, up to 81 megapixels. Unfortunately, the stitching and layering artifacts and blurring were visible when you zoomed into the photos. The Insta360 Pro 2 was the first 8K 360 VR camera, and is mainly geared for professionals. It's able to shoot 360 VR photos and videos from a tripod, or attached to a drone. And the Farsight feature provides air-to-ground range of up to 300 meters, with 30 frames per second preview. Sharp had been showing off their 8K camera prototype since 2019, but Canon quietly launched theirs first. The R5 became the first prosumer 8K interchangeable lens camera on the market. Most creators won't produce content in 8K, but it does give them the ability to reframe a video and add zoom effects without sacrificing quality, as well as providing plenty of room for image stabilization. Another digital camera released in 2020 comes from Vecnos, a new venture from Ricoh, the developer of the first handheld 360 camera. The IQUI is the smallest 360 camera around. It's mainly focused on 360 selfies but can also record video. Selfies can be captioned, animated and converted to short videos by the camera's app. With its small size and simple interface, the IQUI is basically the point-and-shoot equivalent of the 360 cameras. Although digital cameras continue their decline, we will see many more innovations. Much of the innovations will come from AI, in order to help us capture, clean up and add effects to our photos and videos. Also, as social media continues to take over our lives, we will want new types of cameras, so we can share unique angles of our activities with our followers. Do you remember your first digital camera?